Hello, gorgeous. Welcome to HG Radio, everything beauty, cancer, and inspiration. Here is your co-founder and host, Kim Becker.
Hello, gorgeous. You are listening to Hello, Gorgeous, everything beauty, cancer, and inspiration on Society Bites Radio, social interaction for the mind and soul. I'm your host, Kim Becker, once a hairdresser and a salon owner, now the founder of a nonprofit organization that coaches and trains women with cancer to help them smile when they look in the mirror. And if you ask me, I will tell you that I have the best job in the whole world. This episode is brought to you by Amplified Marketing Group. They specialize in affordable mobile solutions that will get you noticed and help you retain customers. Check them out at www.amplifiedmarketing. Our guest today is Rosemary Seelauis. Rosemary, did I pronounce that right?
Seelauis.
Seelauis. Okay, good.
And please call me Rosie.
Okay.
Rosie Seelauis. Yeah.
All right, Rosie. Rosie is the senior anaplastologist at IU Health Craniofacial Center. Rosie's clinical practice specializes primarily in the treatment and fabrication of implant-retained facial prosthesis and virtual surgical planning for facial reconstruction using 3D imaging and printing technologies. She maintains an emphasis on ensuring that an informed patient and family is central to defining treatment goals and successful outcomes. A leader in her field, Rosie has lectured extensively worldwide on her clinical and technology expertise and has mentored graduate and postgraduate students both domestically and abroad. Her primary research interests are central to the clinical application of 3D digital and coloring techniques to define the best practices and treatment outcomes for surgical and prosthetic reconstruction and rehabilitation of the head and neck. She has served on multiple professional and scientific and editorial boards and committees for both research and clinical endeavors. Hi, Rosie, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Kim, or shall I say, hello, gorgeous.
Hello, gorgeous. Well, it makes me smile, so certainly I'll take that. I am so excited to have you here. And can I just say that last week, after we talked for about 45 minutes, I got off the phone and I thought, man, I wish you lived next door because I would just I feel like we could be friends because you were so easy to talk to. And I loved that you shared your story with me. And so I thought that this would be a great place because not only are you wonderful and just a spearheading in your field, but you are also a 10-year survivor. And I love being able to bring those stories to our listeners because of the fact that women that are newly diagnosed or in the midst of their treatment need to hear stories like yours because you are the inspiration. Normalcy returns. It may be a new normal, but normalcy returns. And I think that that's so inspiring because women need to understand that you can get through it, you can beat it, and you do get back to the other side of things. So I appreciate you being here and your willingness to share your story with us.
And likewise, Kim, I too feel like our meeting is the beginning of what will be a new journey for both of us. And I'm really, truly grateful for what you do and what you've done and what you've built, both as a provider and also as a survivor. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I really do have the best job in the whole world. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful that and because of the work that I do, I get to meet incredible women like yourself. So I'm just really grateful. So let's start off. I want to know so you were diagnosed with breast cancer. It was 10 years ago, but tell us a little bit about your diagnosis.
So, some of the things I'm going to say might sound a bit strange because I use words about feeling grateful about how I was diagnosed with cancer and things like that. And hopefully it'll make sense when I kind of get through it. But I feel somewhat lucky in that I was not diagnosed, but a lump was found when I was 41. And I credit the detection of my cancer to my PCP, my primary care physician, who was the one who found the lump. I'm one of these women who's always had kind of variably dense breasts. And so, it's hard to tell, like, what's a lump, what's not a lump. But my PCP, who I've come to appreciate, really has her own great instinct, found something that she didn't like. And it happened that I had not yet, I was scheduled for my very first mammogram. And so I had a mammogram, and they did find abnormal cells in the imaging, which then they wanted to proceed and kind of look at it further. And so I had a biopsy. I did end up having a lumpectomy, and thankfully it turned out benign. But with that I like to say I was shortlisted at that point. So at that point I was shortlisted, and because I was part of a really great breast program up at North Shore University, there's a great breast center, and it was captained by Catherine Yao, and I was put on this short list. So what that short list meant was that I was going to have some kind of diagnostic imaging or testing every 6 months. So I was on a flip-flop of having a mammogram, then having an MRI 6 months later, then having a mammogram, and that kind of thing. And my actual malignant tumor was detected. It was very small, and it was detected from MRI imaging.
Wow.
And, it was interesting that, I was a little concerned about I was a little late on getting that MRI scheduled. And so I was kind of doing the typical beating myself up. Once you're in this category of, cancer potential, you find lots of excuses to beat yourself up.
Yes.
But I was a little bit late. But it turned out, I wonder if I had been on time with that, because of the type of tumor and cancer I had. It was a very aggressive, fast-growing tumor, but they caught it small. Had I made my appointment on time, it might not have even started yet. So, it's something I feel lucky in that I happened to be on the short list, and it happened to be caught in the way it was at the time it was.
So from the time of your first mammogram with the atypical cells till the time where they actually saw the tumor on the MRI, what's the time lapse between those two dates, those two things?
So it was roughly, I want to say it was around 18 months. The first finding the lump in 2009 put me on the short list. And then it was about a year and a half, or within a year and a half later. So in 2011 is when, they saw this, they biopsied it. It was definitively a malignancy, and that kind of set the next course.
And so what course of treatment did they actually have you go through then once they determined that it was malignant?
So because of the type of cancer I had, obviously you learn very quickly there are so many different kinds of breast cancer, and each one has their own specific pathway. Because of the type I had, which was a estrogen receptor negative, HER2 positive tumor, it was very small, but it was just over the threshold of indicating or needing chemotherapy. So with this particular type of tumor, one, of course, is resection, get rid of the tumor. And then I had some options. My options were the chemo was a given, and it was chemo for 6 cycles, and then it continued on with a dose of Herceptin. Herceptin is the medicine that targets this tumor well, but it works best in the environment of chemotherapy. So that was a given. I did have an option of I could either do radiation to the treatment side breast, which didn't really make much sense to me, because I'm like, there's potential for this cancer to grow in either breast tissue, either side. And my initial lump was in the other side. So my initial lump was in my right breast, and the malignancy was in my left breast. I'm like, well, why are you only going to treat one breast? So the other option, if I opted not to do radiation, was to do a mastectomy. And I elected a double mastectomy with immediate reconstruction.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And so they did that. So did they do that after the chemo? Then you said they did the chemo first and got rid of everything, and then they did the double mastectomy?
So what they did was, first there was the initial resection of the tumor, which was a lumpectomy as well, with a sentinel node biopsy.
Yeah.
So I had, fortunately, because they caught it early, I had negative nodes, so that was all great. So that was helpful. And then probably, not soon after the initial surgery, I started the chemotherapy, and that extended for about 4 months roughly. And it was about a month after I finished up the chemotherapy, I was still receiving the Herceptin, because the Herceptin is a therapy that's given for a full year.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was finished with the chemotherapy, about a month after that is when, we were talking about, all right, you either have to do this or you have to do this. What do you want to do? And, I did a lot of soul searching and more fact finding and things like that, as you get very good at. And I elected for the double mastectomy. So that happened, I think, around October, November in 2011, and it was a two-part. So first there were two surgeons. There was my breast surgeon and the reconstructive surgeon. And first there's the removal of all the breast tissue, and I was fortunate because of the placement of my tumor that I was able to have a nipple sparing procedure. So I,
good.
Still have my native natural nipples, which there's pros and cons to that, but
Yes.
anyhow, so there was the initial resection and then immediate placement of actually, first were tissue expanders. So the tissue expanders were basically saline balloons to ensure that the pocket for the definitive, sorry, I'm using some technical terms, but
I'm following. Yep, I'm following.
Silicone prosthesis, that there was room enough in the pocket of the skin around my breast tissue. So that happened about, I want to say, like 3 or 4 months later. Things get a little fuzzy after time, but so that's kind of how the sequence went.
So looking back now, like, what's the one thing that you wish you would have known at the beginning of your cancer journey? Like, you know what I mean? It's just, gosh, if only I wish I would have known then what I know now, kind of thing. So is there one thing that when you were all said and done that you were like, gosh, I wish I would have known this at the beginning?
So, I find that's a really interesting question, because I think any one of us who's been diagnosed with cancer, it's like, the door has slammed in your face, and it's, you have to stop everything you're doing, and you stop your life, and you have to rethink things. I guess in a way I think about it as, what would I have done differently? So one thing is, I come from a really large family. I have 13 siblings, and I made the choice with yes, a lot.
Wow.
And at the time my mother was alive, I made the choice that I wanted to tell each of my siblings individually. I wanted to share with them, because the way that you manage sharing that information, one, is both very personal, and in a way you kind of want to manage damage. There's some damage control in that, I guess.
Sure.
But what I learned from that is I didn't realize how taxing mentally and emotionally each one of those conversations was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that whatever was the response of the sibling I was talking with, that sort of sucked energy out of me. And so I went through this 13, 14 times.
Wow.
So I think the mass email approach is not
right.
a bad thing. So I learned about the value of that. And, for any cancer patient, I feel like each cancer patient should have a PA, and I considered, starting a business for that, that kind of thing, because also understanding how to communicate and the amount of time and energy it takes to communicate with everyone who wants to know how you're doing. Everyone wants and needs to know that you're doing okay and that you're healing, and they want to be there. And if they don't get information, if they don't get communications, then, the anxiety starts to build. So kind of having a professional communicator with all of your networks is, I think, would a very helpful tool, so that you can just focus independently and selfishly and on your own on